Andrew Smith. I'm Senior Vice President, Circle Logistics. I've been in the industry for 14 years. I've been with Circle for 10. I manage about $250 million worth of truckload freight spend and about 200 employees in 5 locations in 3 countries.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It is peak season for most businesses. But if we can maybe just touch on something that's been mentioned, especially with the latest news in the last few days coming out with Convoy in the US, freight broker shutting doors. It is quite unspectacular. I mean, a lot of people said that there is some movement in the freight sector. But what is interesting is that they say that they had to close their doors because of a freight recession. Now, can you maybe just tell us, is there anything that we should be worried about? Is there something like a freight recession taking place at the moment?
I personally don't think so. I think the decline in the freight market as a freight broker in the last year has been really linked to oversupply. If you talk to most brokers, volumes aren't down, or they're not down that much relative to revenue and gross margins. You go back to post-COVID supply chain issues that we saw, and it really created a supply chain bubble. And a lot of companies got a lot of venture capital to go after the market. And as a freight broker, Convoy, companies like Circle, we operate in the middle space, right? Typically, a lot of primary lanes or heavy dense lanes have historically not gone to brokers. Those go directly to asset-based companies. And where brokers fit into the market, typically, for the most part, is in less dense lanes or more one-off project type opportunities. I know Convoy had some dedicated opportunities that relied on volume and drop trailers, but still, at the end of the day, historically, where brokers make most of their money comes in the cream of the top of the industry. And when you have an oversupply glut, that goes away. Convoy is not the first digital freight broker to go under. I made a post on my LinkedIn over a year ago predicting they might go under, because I've seen other digital freight companies start off as a brokerage, and then they turn around to sell their technology. And that usually, to me, is the sign that they're not doing well, they're not making money, and then they're going to try to take their IP and make some kind of revenue off of it, because they're not profitable as a freight brokerage. And fundamentally, what it comes down to is freight brokers and most folks in the transportation, where they fit in the supply chain, is as a pipeline business, not a platform business. And this goes back to business school 101. There's pipeline businesses and platform businesses, right? Your platform businesses is a mall or an eBay, anywhere where somebody creates a platform where two people, buyers and sellers, can come together and interact and exchange with each other. But if you look around my offices, I have a sea of salespeople and operations people that work on computers and phones. And every phone call they make is a value add throughout the supply chain. I have customers that sometimes use, very large customers, Fortune 1000 companies, that have very fragmented tech stacks. They use 3 or 4 or 5 different portals just for scheduling an appointment, right? Well, that's not something that fits well into a platform. And so that's why I'm convinced that these venture capital companies that keep trying to invest into freight tech and make platform companies work will never succeed, because every phone call my staff makes, whether that's scheduling an appointment to pick up or deliver a load, to collect a POD, these are things that you cannot automate today. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20 years, but even Fortune 500 companies are still too fragmented to make a platform business work. So in regards to your question about the current state of the industry and is there a recession, I personally, I don't see a freight recession right now. Volumes are still there. Rates have come down. Gross margins have come down. But I think next year, and depending on what's going on in the world geopolitically, it's possible that we may see a freight recession. It doesn't appear like it, to be honest. I think next year is going to be more demand driven, while the last year and the decline in the markets has really just been supply driven. And I think that the companies that are going out of business had either poor or dysfunctional business models to begin with, or were just well undercapitalized for a normalizing market. We at Circle, we plan for the type of margins that we're operating at today, and it's one of the reasons why we're financially healthy. We recognize that the margins over the last 2 years aren't sustainable and are atypical of historically where freight brokerage fits into the market.
Three things that you think shippers should think about currently. As you've mentioned, next year going to be demand driven. In that climate, what do you think shippers should be thinking about right now to position themselves?
That's a really great question. First and foremost, I think shippers should be thinking about the financial viability of their partners and what's their business model. I have 1,000 shippers that we work with from month to month at Circle, and shockingly, that's not a question we get very often. And via the Carmack Amendment, if a middleman goes under, the shippers are still responsible for paying the freight bills. And sometimes when their partner goes under, that they might end up paying the freight bill twice, right? So that's a very high risk to shippers that they should be thinking about evaluating their partners, checking on their financial viability, because Convoy is not the first and they're not going to be the last broker or even large broker to go under. The second thing I would really be thinking about right now if I was a shipper is what does a carrier base look like of their partners? There's a lot of fraud going on in the industry. So how are your partners combating that fraud? What are they doing to prevent that fraud? We at Circle, we've done a lot of things. We've built a fraud prevention team. We've brought in some new analytics, some new data, some third-party companies that we're working with, and we relatively have it under control. But it was a very large, monumental task for us to achieve, and it required a lot of investment in a lot of different places. And when you have a decline in market, bad actors or actors that aren't held to the laws of the United States or don't care about them, they commit crimes. And a lot of that's taking place. I think that when insurance renewals come around for brokers and trucking companies over the next 2 months, you're going to see carrier exits accelerate because the premiums are going to go up way more than what we've ever seen due to a lot of the fraud and cargo theft. So that's number two I would be looking at, is what is the quality of the carriers your brokers are using and their financial viability. The third thing I would be looking for is to make sure you're aligned with your strategic partners based on whatever volume you expect for next year, right? A lot of shippers have been in cutting mode and cutting out brokers or carriers that they didn't need over the last year. I don't expect within the next 6 months that there's going to be a huge volume increase where they need these providers again, but I would caution shippers not to alienate themselves from the valuable relationships they've had in the past that have helped them through tough times. Maybe they haven't needed them now over the last 6 months, but I think that once these carrier exits and the pruning that's happening in the industry is over, I think that shippers need to be prepared to rely on strategic partners that are able to move their freight and move their freight with quality. Tracking is a big thing. It's 2023, right? Everyone's got mobile apps and APIs and EDIs for everything. If your partner isn't able to deliver real-time tracking visibility to you, those are partners that I would look at with a little extra scrutiny, because those partners that have that data can do a lot of neat things with that data when it comes to escalations and predictive analytics and lane pairing and lane matching. So I'd be looking at the tech of the freight partners that you have and making sure that you're set up for a turnaround in the freight market sometime in the future.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your insight. I think it's really helpful, and just for businesses as they prepare for next year and aligning all of their strategies for what's being anticipated for 2024. Thank you so much, Andrew.
You're welcome. Appreciate your time.